June 1944. A German officer in northern France stands over a radio table and stares at a decoded message that feels, to him, like proof. It is short. It is urgent. It is exactly what he wants to see. A massive Allied army, tanks, infantry, landing craft, is preparing to invade Europe. Not across the beaches near Caen, not in Normandy. Number. The message says the real attack will land in the Pas-de-Calais, the narrow waist of the French coast, the closest point to England, the most direct path to the heart of Germany. Just a few days more. Hold your armor. Do not release the panzers, Hitler is told. Hitler believes it. And because he believes it, tens of thousands of German troops sit in the wrong place, waiting for the real invasion that never comes, while the actual invasion is already happening somewhere else. That lie, that confidence, was not an accident. It was built, by hand, piece by piece, by people who never touched a rifle, by people who never fired a shot in Normandy, by forgers and map makers and radio operators wearing British uniforms in windowless rooms, by painters, by carpenters, by a gambler who pushed not just a bluff across the table, but the entire future of the war. The British called it Operation Fortitude. The Germans called it intelligence. And for a few critical weeks in 1944, Hitler trusted a lie so hard that it helped decide the fate of Europe. This is the story of how you convince a dictator to ignore reality in real time. This is how you take something that doesn't exist and make the enemy deploy troops against it. This is the story of the army that wasn't there. To understand why this matters, you have to understand how desperate the situation really was. By 1944, everyone knew what had to happen next. The Allies, Britain, the United States, Canada, and their other partners had to invade occupied Europe. They had to land on a hostile coast held by German troops and push inland fast enough to avoid being wiped off the map. There was no other way to break Nazi control of Western Europe. Everybody knew this. Hitler knew it. His generals knew it. British intelligence knew it. American commanders knew it. And because everybody knew it, the beaches of northern France had become the single most dangerous place in the world. Think about what the Germans had going for them. They had fortifications all along the coast, bunkers, artillery positions, coastal guns in reinforced concrete, minefields, tank traps, machine gun nests dug into the high ground. They had infantry dug in and waiting. They had armored divisions, panzers, positioned inland, ready to counterattack the minute the Allies stepped off their landing craft and tried to form a beachhead. Now imagine being one of the Allied planners looking at a map in 1943. You're staring at that wall of steel and you're thinking, okay, we have to punch through this on the first day, or the first day is the last day. You don't get a second try. If you land in the wrong place and the Germans crush you, you do not go back to England, regroup, and try again next month. Politically, logistically, morally, number. You've burned your shot. Germany keeps Europe. Millions more die. So how do you even begin to improve your odds? You can't make the beaches safe. You can't make the Germans weaker. You can't unbuild their defenses. So you do the next best thing. You make them look the wrong way. You don't just surprise them. You convince them in advance to convince themselves that what's happening in front of them is not really what's happening. That was the British gamble. Don't just hide the blow. Get the enemy to anticipate a different blow. Get them to keep their fist in the wrong place. That way when you hit them, you're hitting a gap. Sounds impossible, it almost was. But they did it, and not by magic, by work. Slow, patient, obsessive work. So we're going to walk through that work. We're going to sit with the people who made this lie. Then we're going to sit with the people who swallowed it. We're going to watch Hitler hold tanks back because of a ghost, and we're going to see how razor-thin the edge was, how easily the lie could have snapped and taken everything with it. Let's start with a single question. Where did Hitler think the Allies would land? Answer: Pas-de-Calais. Why? Two reasons. Reason one, geography. If you look at a map of the English Channel, the Pas-de-Calais is the narrowest point between England and France. Straight line, short crossing, fast reinforcement, easy logistics. If you're a German general, you're thinking, If I were the Allies, that's where I'd go. Reason 2, it's also the closest path to Germany itself. Land there, break through, drive east. You're in Belgium, then the Ruhr, then the industrial heart of Hitler's war machine. So as far as the German command was concerned, Pas de Calais wasn't just a possibility, it was the obvious answer. And that is a beautiful thing if you're a British deception planner. Because if the enemy already wants to believe something, your job is not to invent a fantasy. Your job is to feed a hunger. You don't have to sell them a lie they don't like. You sell them the lie they're begging to hear. So British intelligence, specifically a small, strange, brilliant unit called the London Controlling Section, working with the 20 Committee, MMI-5, and MI-6 in the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, decided to build an entire fake army whose job was to invade Pas de Calais. Not in real life, on paper, in radio, in rumor, on film, on the ground, but not for real. They were going to make the Germans see what they already expected to see. And they were going to make Hitler believe that the actual Normandy landings were just a distraction, a feint, a warm-up punch to draw German forces away from the real target, which would definitely be Pas de Calais in a few weeks. That was the core of Operation Fortitude. Make Normandy look like a trick. Make Pas de Calais look like destiny. Now listen to what I'm about to say next, because this is where the gamble becomes insane. For this lie to work, tens of thousands of Allied soldiers had to die in Normandy, and keep dying in Normandy, while German armored divisions sat just a few hours' drive away and didn't move. Read that again. This wasn't harmless theater. This wasn't just, ha-ha, we fooled them. This deception had a price tag. That price tag was blood. If the lie failed, the Germans would release panzer divisions immediately, drive them straight into the landing zones in Normandy, crush the beachhead under tank treads, and throw the Allies back into the sea. That would be it. If the lie held, those tanks would stay in place, waiting for an invasion that would never come, while the real invasion dug in and spread. So the British weren't gambling with ink. They were gambling with the lives of everyone hitting Omaha, Utah, Juneau, Sword, and Gold Beaches. That is how serious this was. Now let's build the ghost. Step 1. You need a commander. Armies are built around personalities. If you tell the Germans you've created a huge invasion army, but you don't give it a commander they recognize, it smells wrong. So the Allies pick the loudest, most aggressive, most headline-grabbing general they have. They pick Lieutenant General George S. Patton. This is genius. To the Germans, Patton is the American they fear most. Not Eisenhower, not Bradley. Patton. Why? Because Patton is fast. In North Africa and Sicily, Patton drove armor like it was a weapon, not a support branch. He moved hard, talked louder than anyone, and seemed to love war in a way that made German officers nervous. He is, to them, the real U.S. spearhead. So perfect. Put him in England. Put him in command of a massive new army. Make sure German intelligence hears that. That new army? It gets a name. First U.S. Army Group, FUSAG. Sounds official, sounds big, sounds mean. FUSAG is based in southeast England, right across from Pas de Calais. And here's the important part. FUSAG does not actually exist, not as a real invasion force, but the Allies are about to make it look like it does. This is where it starts getting almost funny, if it weren't so lethal. Step 2, you need physical proof. You can't just send one radio message and hope the Germans buy it. You have to make this army visible. You have to let enemy reconnaissance planes, the German Luftwaffe, fly over southeast England, take pictures, and see an army big enough to cross the channel. So they build one. Not a real one, a fake one. An army of air. They build inflatable tanks. Yes, actual inflatable tanks. Full-sized, detailed, painted, shaped like Sherman tanks and trucks and artillery. You could walk up to one and push it with your finger and it would wobble. But from the sky, in a grainy photo taken from a fast-moving recon plane, it looked absolutely real. They lay out fake motor pools. They build fake fuel depots. They string fake barbed wire. They set up fake aircraft, wooden frames, painted like fighters and bombers, parked ready on dummy airfields. They even create fake landing craft, from canvas and timber and creativity, lined up along the coast where invasion barges would logically be staged for a crossing to Pas-de-Calais. Whole fake divisions, whole fake support echelons. From the air, convincing. On the ground, Hollywood. And just in case a German agent on British soil might sneak close, they put sentries and foot traffic around the decoys. They leave tire marks. They stack crates. They run mess tents. They generate the tiny background details that make something feel lived in. Step 3, you need sound. Armies talk. Armies hum. Armies leak radio. So British and American signal units go to work building fake radio traffic. Hours and hours and hours of encrypted chatter representing entire divisions of men who do not exist. Radio nets for artillery that isn't there. Requesting ammo that hasn't been shipped. Logistics officers moving fuel to tank battalions that are made of canvas. Military police rerouting truck convoys that do not exist to roads that are not actually being used. Field hospitals receiving imaginary wounded. Supply depots requesting more barbed wire and more sandbags for beach obstacles. For a landing they're never going to make. That radio traffic is sent in formats the Germans already understand, with patterns that fit what they've seen before. It's not cartoon noise, it's proper, disciplined, believable comms. And it is constant. Constant, constant, constant. Because here's the key. If you only transmit sometimes, it looks staged. If your fake divisions talk non-stop for weeks, at all hours, angry, tired, bored, complaining, routine, it starts to sound exactly like the chatter of a real army preparing to board real boats. German listening stations pick it up. German analysts transcribe it. German intelligence maps it. And then German command briefs Hitler with it. Step 4, you need paper. Paper is boring, but paper wins wars. Fortitude's planners produce fake orders of battle, the kind of internal paperwork a real army would have. Lists of units, command structures, logistics tables, shipping schedules, movement orders. All of it can be found, intercepted, photographed. And, this matters, it all lines up. The radio chatter mentions the same units that appear in the paperwork. The supply traffic matches what the fake fuel depots can supposedly hold. The decoy landing craft are in locations that correspond to embarkation points on the maps. No loose ends, no obvious gaps. That is how you sell a lie to a professional intelligence service. Not with drama, with consistency. Step 5, you use what you already control. Britain, by 1944, sits on something almost unfair, the double-cross system. This is one of those, once you know it, it changes how you see the whole war facts. By this point in the war, virtually every German spy in Britain has been caught. Every single one. MI5 rolled them up, arrested them. Then, here's the part that's almost unbelievable, turned them. They didn't just throw them in prison, they flipped them into double agents. Now those agents, German spies reporting from inside Britain, are feeding Berlin what London tells them to feed. Imagine that. You're the German High Command. You think you have sources inside southern England. Recruited assets, trusted assets, long-term assets. Those assets are, in reality, reading from a British script. And they're telling you, yes, the Americans are massing under Patton. Yes, the 1st U.S. Army Group is preparing to cross at Pas-de-Calais. Yes, all indications are that Normandy, if it's hit at all, will just be a diversion. The main blow is Calais. Soon, this is devastating. Because this isn't radio chatter. This isn't photographs from a fast flyover. This is your own guy confirming it. And Hitler, who was already biased to believe Calais is the real target, hears that and thinks, of course, of course. He leans into it. He wants it, so he accepts it. That is the hook sliding into the jaw. And at this point, the gamble is live. Because the lie is no longer being built. The lie is now operating in the head of the man in charge of where the German tanks go. And the countdown to invasion is already running. Which is where we have to leave this first part. Because the next part is dawn on June 6, 1944. Normandy, Real soldiers, real beaches, real blood in the surf. And somewhere far away from those beaches, German armor, German reserves, German reinforcements, all sitting still, waiting for a landing that will never come, all because of a ghost army, an inflatable tank, and a stack of lies so disciplined they became someone else's reality. Hold that picture in your mind. Patton staring at a map in England, playing commander of an army that doesn't exist. Hitler staring at a different map in Germany, convinced that army is the key to everything. And in between them, the channel. Black water, gray dawn. Real men in real boats, paying for the lie with their lives. In part 2, we go there. We go to the beaches. We go into Hitler's war room. We listen to the order that never comes. And we watch in real time how far you can bend a dictator's certainty before it breaks. June 6, 1944. Dawn. Cold water hammering metal. Engines low and shaking. Men packed shoulder to shoulder in landing craft. Faces gray with spray and nerves. Fingers flexing on rifles that feel suddenly too light for what they're about to do. Some of them are praying. Some of them are throwing up. Some of them are trying to look like neither is happening. They can hear machine guns already. They haven't even hit the beach yet. This is Normandy, the real invasion. And right now, nobody in these boats cares about inflatable tanks in Kent, or forged radio traffic, or deception frameworks with clever code names. They care about living through the first minute ashore. But here's the part they can't see, the part that decides whether they live through minute 2, 60, 80, 100 miles inland, sitting behind reinforced positions, are German armored divisions that could crush them. If those tanks are released now, if they move now, if they drive now, straight to the beaches, then this whole thing could still fail. Right now, in the first hour, that is how thin the margin is. This is why fortitude exists. Because while those landing craft are slamming forward in the surf at Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juneau, Sword, while ramps are about to drop and men are about to run into machine gun fire, something else is happening at the same time, far from the sand, in a room with maps on the wall. Let's go there. We're inside a German command center. There's cigarette smoke. There's paper everywhere. There's a map of northern France covered in pins and grease pencil marks. Officers are moving fast, but not frantically. A runner comes in with a message. Enemy landings reported in Normandy. Normandy, not Pas-de-Calais, not the expected sector. Normandy. The first reaction in this room is not panic, it's calculation. Because remember, the deception isn't just, they'll land in Pas-de-Calais, number. The deception is, anything that isn't Pas-de-Calais is a feint, a decoy, a distraction. So when those first reports come in, airborne troops dropping behind the beaches, paratroopers scattered across hedgerows and fields, gliders slamming into the French countryside, the German red at first is basically, all right, this is the appetizer. They're softening us. The main course hits Calais. This is still good for us. This is still on script. And that thought, that reflex, buys the Allies time. Precious, bloody, irreplaceable time. Because here's what the Germans do next. They wait. They wait for confirmation that this is the real landing before they release the armored divisions closest to Normandy. Now listen carefully, because this right here is the hinge. Those armored divisions did not belong to just any local commander. They were under the authority of the German High Command and ultimately under Adolf Hitler's personal control. So, on the morning of June 6, 1944, in the critical earliest hours of the Normandy invasion, the hours where men are getting cut down in the surf and clawing their way off beaches and trying to blow gaps in seawalls with satchel charges, German panzer divisions that could have smashed them are effectively sitting on please hold. Why? Because the man who has to say go is being told don't go yet. Because Berlin is still convinced that Calais is the main target. Because the lie is still alive. This is fortitude doing its job. This is the fake army still holding German armor in place, even while a very real Allied army is trying not to drown in waist-high water and machine gun fire. You want to know what a lie is worth in war? It's worth hours. And on D-Day, hours are a currency paid in lives. Let's slow down and sit inside two places at once. Place 1, Omaha Beach. It's a slaughter. The first waves are being torn apart by interlocked German machine gun nests, mortars, artillery from concrete bunkers on high ground. Everything pre-sighted, everything zeroed in. Landing craft are getting hit before the ramps even drop. The water is red. Men are hunched behind Czech hedgehogs, those twisted steel anti-landing obstacles, using them as cover because there is no other cover. Radio traffic is chaos. A lot of units are not where they're supposed to be. A lot of officers who were supposed to be giving orders are already dead or wounded. If you pause the story here and you don't know the ending, you can absolutely believe that Omaha will fail. You can absolutely believe that they'll get pushed back into the surf and pinned there until they're either killed or forced to retreat. That is not exaggeration. That is how close it was. Place 2, Pas de Calais. Quiet, calm, undisturbed. German divisions, including powerful armored reserves, are dug in, on standby, watching the channel where the main invasion is supposed to come. They are waiting to counterattack the real landing, except the real landing has already started. Somewhere else. Do you feel that tension? That split? Blood in one place, silence in the other? That distance, that mismatch, is the point. That distance is the plan. That distance is fortitude. Let's talk about Hitler, because at the end of the day, this deception only works if one specific brain believes it. Reports start coming in rapidly. Paratroopers in Normandy, naval bombardment off the Norman coast, multiple beach sectors hit, Allied ships visible offshore, German coastal batteries calling for reinforcement. Here's what you'd expect to happen at this moment. You'd expect German high command to immediately release nearby panzers, fast armored divisions, to drive straight to Normandy and throw the Allies back into the sea before they can build up. Here's what actually happens. There's hesitation, there's argument, there's delay. Some German commanders on the ground are screaming, basically, let us go. Let us go now. We can crush them now before they link the beaches, before they get off the sand. But the top level, the level that's still living inside the lie, says no. Wait, this is probably not the main blow. The main blow is still coming at Calais. If we move too early, we'll expose Calais. Think about that. Think about the effect. Every hour those tanks do not move, the Allies get to land more men, more vehicles, more artillery, more bulldozers, more engineers, more medics, more radios, more everything. Every hour the beachhead stops being a beachhead and starts being a front line. Every hour chaos hardens into structure, and at a certain point, once you've landed enough men and guns and armor, you're no longer something that can be swatted away with one counterpunch. You're a wound that will not close. That is what Fortitude bought. That is what the British gamble was always about. Not just confusing German intelligence, stalling German force, paralyzing German response. Let me put it like this. The lie didn't have to last forever. It only had to last long enough. By midday, German commanders in France are starting to understand that Normandy is not just a raid. It's not just a probing attack. It is an invasion. It is the invasion. But Hitler still isn't convinced. Because remember, he's getting more than just battlefield updates. He's also getting intelligence summaries. Those summaries include the same poison the British have been dripping for weeks. They still mention Patton. They still describe the 1st U.S. Army Group across from Pas de Calais. They still insist that a massive force, bigger than what's landing in Normandy, is waiting to cross there for the true strike. So Hitler thinks like this. All right, maybe Normandy is real. Fine, but it's still not the main attack. The Allies are trying to draw me south. They want me to move my armor away from Calais. I won't fall for it. I'll keep my main reserves in place, right where they'll be needed when the real hammer falls. That stubbornness, that refusal to release his best armored units to crush the landings immediately, is a direct win for Fortitude. Because while he's doing that, American, British, and Canadian soldiers are clawing their way inland. They're blowing gaps in seawalls. They're overrunning gun nests. They're linking separate beachheads into one continuous line. They're dragging wounded men to cover and bringing up medics and ammo and radios and mortars. They're getting off the sand, and once they're off the sand, the invasion stops being fragile. It becomes durable, and that's the point of no return. Let's zoom in for a second on something completely unglamorous, because this is where history actually turns. There's a bulldozer on one of the beaches, just a bulldozer, covered in salt spray and mud and smoke. The driver's half deaf from artillery going off around him. He can smell burning fuel and bodies. He has machine gun rounds zipping overhead and pinging into metal like angry insects. He keeps ducking his head, then forcing himself back up. And all he's doing is pushing obstacles out of the way. Steel stakes, log piles, tangled beach traps meant to rip open landing craft and stop tanks from rolling ashore. He's clearing lanes. He's making a path. When those lanes finally open, tanks start coming off landing craft and onto French sand. Slow, ugly, exposed, but real. And a tank on the beach is not just a tank, it's a promise. We are staying. That's what Hitler's delay bought. It bought that bulldozer enough time to finish its job. And when you step back and look at the day at full scale, you realize something cold and simple. The lie became armor. Now, was fortitude perfect? Number. Here's the dangerous part. Even after it was obvious that Normandy was the main landing, even after Allied troops had come ashore, even after beachheads had linked and supply lines had started flowing, the deception machine did not shut off. It pivoted. It said, yes, okay, Normandy is real, but it's still just phase one. The decisive blow is still coming at Pas de Calais. The landing you're looking at now, that's just to pin you in place. The real knockout is in a few days across the narrow channel, under Patton. Wait for it. Do not move those reserves. And Hitler believed that version too. For weeks, not hours, weeks. That is not a small detail. That means German forces stayed tied down, guarding a coastline that would never be attacked, long after it was obvious that Normandy was not a sideshow. That means fewer reinforcements slammed into the Allied bridgehead when they could have made the most difference. That means the Allies were allowed to build up in France without being hit by the full concentrated weight of German armor in one go, at maximum strength, in those first desperate days. In other words, fortitude didn't just get the Allies onto the beach, it helped keep them there. And that is sometimes described quietly in planning documents and in post-war interviews as the difference. The difference between D-Day being the beginning of the end of the war in Europe and D-Day being a catastrophe. Now, it's easy, sitting safely decades later, to turn all this into a clean story about brilliant deception and gullible Nazis. It wasn't clean. It was fragile. It was scary. It was morally heavy. Because here's a truth that's uncomfortable, but it matters. If fortitude had failed, if the Germans had called the bluff, ignored the fake army, released their tanks immediately, and driven hard into the beaches on June 6th, there would be no clever British trick legend. There would just be mass graves and a canceled invasion. That was on the table, and the people running fortitude knew it. They were essentially betting men's lives on their ability to control someone else's perception at distance, under stress, in wartime. That is a cold bet, and they made it anyway, because the alternative, not making it, was worse. The alternative was sending men across that water with no protection but their own luck. This way, at least, there was a chance to tilt the field. This way, the first wave of men hitting the beaches had something standing in front of them besides raw courage. They had a wall made of lies. So let's pull the camera up. Let's look at this in full. On paper, the invasion of Europe in June 1944 was about force. Hundreds of thousands of troops, warships, bombers, paratroopers, artillery, tanks, industry. But underneath all that, holding open the door for that force to land, was something softer, stranger, and in some ways even more dangerous. Story. A story England told Germany. A story Germany told Hitler. A story Hitler told himself. A story that said, the real threat is not here. The real threat is over there. Keep watching over there. Don't move. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. That story killed people. That story saved people. That story helped decide how quickly Europe could be freed from Nazi rule. And that story was made by people most armies would have ignored if the war had stayed normal. Painters, stage designers, radio techs, linguists, clerks. Double agents pretending to be loyal Nazis while taking quiet instructions from MI5. People making fake patches for fake divisions and stitching them onto real uniforms so German eyes would accidentally see the right shoulder insignia in the right English pub at the right time. People driving trucks in circles just to leave tire tracks in fields where armored regiments supposedly slept. People whose names you will never hear in a movie. All of them together building an army out of air, and then aiming that army like a weapon. After the war, a German general was asked how effective the Allied deception was. He didn't give a speech. He just said basically, "We were sure Calais was the main attack. We held for it. We were wrong, that's it." That's the whole quiet admission. We were wrong. But inside those 3 words is the weight of everything that followed. Because once the Allies were ashore in Normandy, and stayed, the clock started running the other way. Germany was now fighting on a shrinking timetable. Soviet forces were already pounding from the east. The Western Allies were now on the continent and growing. Fuel, men, armor, aircraft, all bleeding out faster than Berlin could replace them. After Normandy holds, the fall of Nazi Germany stops being a question of if and becomes a question of how fast, and fortitude helps start that clock. Let's end with 2 rooms side by side. Room 1, a British deception office in London, weeks before D-Day. It's late, cigarettes, coffee gone cold, a chalkboard covered in arrows and timings, and names of units that do not exist. People are arguing about whether the fake fuel depot near Dover needs to look bigger in aerial photos. Someone is handwriting a leaked memo that'll be found by a German source. Somebody else is practicing the voice style of a US logistics colonel, so the radio traffic will sound American, not British. It's ridiculous. It's mundane. It's paperwork. Room 2, Normandy, the same hour on June 6th. Men are using their own bodies as cover for each other. They are dragging wounded through surf while machine guns stitch the water around them. They are blowing open wire with explosives taped together by hand. They are shouting over artillery, over fear, over pain. They are staying. They are not leaving. Those 2 rooms are connected. One room gives the other room a chance. That's the truth. That's the cost. That's the gamble. So when we say the secret British gamble that forced Hitler to trust a lie, it's not just a clever line. It's literal. British intelligence built a false army and asked the enemy to believe in it. Hitler did. And for long enough, that belief froze steel where it could have killed men who were still in the water. That's not the whole reason D-Day succeeded, but it is one of the reasons D-Day didn't fail. And sometimes in war, didn't fail is the line between a world that looks like ours and a world that never gets rescued. In the end, that's what this story really is. Not the story of a fake army, not the story of a loud American general playing bait, not even the story of a dictator who thought he was too clever to be fooled. It's the story of time, how a handful of planners in quiet rooms stole just enough time and handed it to exhausted men on an open beach. Time to get off the sand, time to get over the wall, time to get inland, time to make invasion become liberation. When you see pictures of Normandy, men crouched behind obstacles, destroyers firing point blank at shore batteries, medics kneeling in surf, remember this, those images exist because somewhere else, someone was lying very, very well. And someone on the other end of that lie wanted to believe it. That's how you bend a dictator's certainty. You don't shout at him, you don't argue with him. You hand him a story he already likes, and then you let him imprison himself inside it, long enough for the real world to break his door down.